Hello and welcome to Season 3 of the ReFolkUs podcast, where we talk to artists and music industry workers about building sustainable creative careers with a focus on folk. I'm your host, Rosalind Dennett. Hello and welcome to ReFolkUs. Today, our guest is Dave Landreth. Dave is one half of prairie roots rockers, the Brothers Landreth. They are two-time Juno winners and Grammy-winning songwriters, and their song Made Up Mind was covered by Bonnie Raitt in 2022, going on to spend 12 weeks at number 1 on the Americana charts and taking the Grammy for Best Americana Performance in 2023. They've toured extensively since 2013 and are currently working on their 4th album due sometime in 2025. Together with his brother Joe and manager Stu Anderson, Dave founded Birthday Cake Records, a Winnipeg-based record label, music publishing, and artist management company. Birthday Cake collaborates with a diverse range of talented artists, including Begonia, Leith Ross, Field Guide, the Be Good Tanyas, The Fretless, Slow Leaves, Madeline Roger, and lots more. Hello, David. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous, Rosalind. How are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. So excited to talk to you today. Folks in our community may remember you from your appearance at the Folk Music Ontario online conference in 2021. You gave an awesome presentation. I believe it was titled River of Nickels.
Yeah, riveting presentation on collecting master rights royalties in the music business.
Since then, we were really excited to have you on. As everybody's just heard, you have a really awesome and growing range of artists on the label that you work with, and quite a few that we'd like to claim in our folk genre. So I'm wondering if you can start off by just giving us a little history of Birthday Cake, history of the label, and how it's grown over the years.
Sure. The label was the brainchild of Stu, who is the Brothers Landreth's manager, and myself, our brainchild. We are the parents of this little idea. And initially, we put the company together thinking that we would focus on supporting songwriters with publishing administration, because we recognized that there was this sort of underserved area amongst our friends where artists early on were struggling to set up their publishing and were being kind of left in the lurch, weren't big enough to attract the attention of some of the various publishing companies around. And we thought we could step in and help that out. But in the process of doing that, we accidentally started a record label, and that quickly kind of rose to the forefront of what we were doing. And we wound up putting out a Bros Landreth record, a Joey Landreth record, and a Begonia record that sort of paved the way for accidentally becoming a record company. And that wound up being the thing that we became known for and just sort of attracted all this attention. And we started putting out records for all our pals. And in the process of doing that, we kind of learned what record labels do and how to do that better and more comprehensively. And as the roster grew, we kind of expanded internally, and we've gone through a couple of iterations of our Birthday Cake team. Currently, we're now at 8 people altogether, myself and Stu included, and my brother Joe, who's also a co-founder. Yeah, it's been kind of an interesting journey from there. It's a very scrappy DIY company. Most of us have artist backgrounds, and we kind of pride ourselves in trying to do things a little bit differently. Very interested in being at the forefront of sort of fair and equitable music deals for artists. And I think the big thing that sort of hopefully sets us apart is that everything that we do here has to pass the vibe test. And I wouldn't put forward a deal to anybody or try and do business with any artist if I wouldn't do that deal myself, or I wouldn't feel good about signing that agreement. And that's kind of led the way. And I think we've, over the course of the last 5 years, have earned a bit of a reputation for being straightforward and honest, as well as, being really hardworking and scrappy and nimble. And here we are in 2024, and we're 5 years old and have this great wide roster of incredible artists, a lot of whom are from Western Canada in our own backyard here in Winnipeg, and across 3 divisions, which is, like you said, the record label, the music management, and publishing side of things.
How many artists do you currently have on the label side of things now?
At any given time, I'd say we're probably actively releasing, between 6 and 12 artists over the course of a year. So it's kind of hard to say exactly how many form the roster. A lot of the stuff we've done, we've got a lot of artists that are sort of off cycle and are working on new records. And so it's almost hard to count exactly, but at this point, I'd say we're, actively releasing, call it a dozen different acts.
And I'd love to dive into the equitable side of it. And you're talking about kind of approaching a label as folks who are informed by being artists. What did that mean to you then when you were then approaching artists to sign? And how do you feel like you were approaching it differently than somebody who maybe hasn't gone through that experience of being an artist already?
I think it comes down to a number of things. Like when we started looking at the deals that we were putting on the table and the kind of business that we were doing with people initially, before the team sort of grew, was Stu, Joy, and I, we sat around going, like, what did we enjoy about deals that we've done in the past? Like, what things stood out to us as being fair or above and beyond or sort of classy or respectable business practices? And then what stuff left us feeling the ick or left us feeling like we were getting screwed or were maybe being misled? And we really went through and tried to carve all that stuff out of the way that we operated. And so interestingly, initially, I think we cut some of the most wildly favorable deals you maybe ever seen for record labels. The pendulum swung a little too far and we've since kind of corrected somewhere in the middle. And I think that also reflects the fact that, we were starting, we were really just bumbling our way through it. We were just figuring out what a record label was doing. And so maybe those early deals reflected that to some extent. And now that we, are really confident in what we're able to do and the infrastructure that we've built and the networks that we've developed and the staff that we've managed to bring onto the team. And I feel like the deals now reflect sort of the firepower that comes along with that. At the end of the day, it's about putting dollars into artists' hands and helping them grow their careers in the most sort of efficient, effective, and holistic ways that we can. And that's fair terms, fair term lengths. A really big one for us out of the gate was sharing the master side of, if you'll remember my previous presentation, talking about the master side of neighboring rights, which can be a wildly lucrative income stream for artists. And if you sign to a label, the sort of industry precedent is that labels keep 100% of that side of the royalty. They don't share it with the artist. And I've always felt like that is rotten, no good business, because that is a royalty generated off the back of an artist's hard work. And the sort of industry standard has been that the artist retains the feature performer half of that, and therefore the quid pro quo is that the record label keeps the master. And my argument has always been that those are two different royalties. One is for the performer, and the other one is a revenue stream like any other generated by the master. And if it's a revenue stream from the master, then it should be divided along the terms of the agreement. And so we've done that from day one. And, without getting into specifics, that has meant a tremendous amount of money in our artists' hands. And some of our clients have bought houses on the backs of that and have significantly improved their quality of living because they can share equitably in this revenue stream. So, that's like a glaring example. And then there's just little things along the way. Because we're a small, nimble company and we're flexible and scrappy, we're able to do things quickly and we can accommodate and help our artists in ways that bigger machines can't accomplish because it's just there are too many hoops to jump through and stuff. We can get in and just sort of support our artists the way they need. We can be flexible about the budgets and the way we roll out campaigns so our artists achieve the goals that they want, as opposed to, maybe revenue at all costs. For us, another really big thing is just sitting down with the people that we work with and finding out what they want out of this wacky ride in the music business, because not everybody wants the same thing. And it's a real mistake to assume that everybody wants to be touring their asses off all the time and grinding it that way. Or if they all want to be, not everybody wants to be famous. Some people, success looks differently, is quantified differently. So figuring that out and then figuring out how we can support it.
How involved are you in the production and kind of development then of folks' albums? It's like when are you hopping in that album cycle? How early?
Usually not tremendously. It does happen for sure. Like Joe produced a record with Leith Ross last year, and that, was very, very involved in that as a co-producer, was in the sessions building that record from the ground up. But I will say generally it's actually a pretty light touch. And I think that comes from the background in roots music, where I'm coming from a place where we trust artists to bring us their art and to realize their vision. That's what our artists do really, really, really well. They know how to make their records, write their songs, and they understand what their voices are and what they want to say. And we try and get out of the way. If our opinion is asked or we're invited into the process, we're more than happy to jump in. And there's not everybody, but our label manager, Bucky, is of Royal Canoe fame and is an extremely accomplished artist and touring musician and has a wealth of information that he can bring to the process. Joe obviously is, my brother and my partner in the Brothers Landreth stuff. He knows what he's talking about. And our marketing manager, B, has a band called Cartel Madras, and she's a killer producer, writer. Like there's just this wealth of artistic stuff that we can bring to the table if it's invited. But by and large, we're kind of counting on the artist to present their vision, and then our job is to amplify it. So I would say, like, honestly, not a huge amount. We're definitely a lot more involved in developing the marketing narratives and the stories behind the records, and seeing how we can sort of build out that world. But when it comes to the records, yeah, generally we're letting the artists do their thing, and then we're just trying to figure out how we can spread the word.
In terms of the traditional versus this kind of maybe more equitable or kind of newer, more modern approach to labels and label deals, I feel like we've seen labels transform from kind of the older model where, yes, they would definitely take, as an artist, all of your money and rights, but would also front all the money and be, be giving you advances and all that sort of thing, kind of acting like a bank for the creation of the record. Now, I know you're not following that model in terms of taking all the artist's money because you're approaching it with a fresh perspective. But do you still have that kind of relationship with artists where you're helping to kind of fund the album creation process, or are you encouraging them to kind of self-fund and then taking it from there?
It depends on the artist, and we have a pretty wide spectrum of deals that we do, and they really are just kind of catered to the artist's goals and objectives. And increasingly, we found that artists are keen to explore some sort of alternative record deals. I don't want to say there's a lot of funding out there. That's definitely misleading, but there are all these avenues for artists to fund records, fund the production of records, whether it's through municipal, provincial, or federal arts council grants, or it's through your local music industry association or funder, or it's Factor, or so a lot of folks are saying, hey, I can come up with a bunch of this cash and I don't necessarily need you to give me a huge advance. What I need is support. I need a team. I need people to count on. People that have these connections can leverage their networks to get my music in front of the editors at Spotify and Apple, can help pitch for sync, can help craft these stories and just amplify the things. We don't necessarily need a bunch of money up front. So for those artists, we're able to cut very different deals. And then we do sort of more traditional deals that are, profit share-esque, where we come in and we're providing either a licensing fee or a recording budget and marketing money, content creation. And it's a little more traditional that way. And then the splits and the sort of terms of the deal reflect the fact that we're going in, we're assuming a lot more risk. But interestingly, it's been wild to have these conversations where even like 5 years ago when we started, a lot of the conversations we started, people were like, well, I need money. How much money are you going to give me up front? And that was sort of a non-starter for a lot of folks. Oh, if we can't talk about a big licensing fee or an advance, sorry, but it's not going to work. And increasingly, we've been showing folks like, hey, here's a spectrum of things that we could do. We could do it like this, or we could do it like this. And a lot of folks are going, wait, so if I can bring a bit of this money, or, and a lot of artists are also producing their own music now very effectively and very, very well. So they're coming to the table going, I don't need a ton of support here. I'm doing a ton of this at home, in my bedroom studio or my project studio. I'm taking it to mixing and mastering, whatever. And now they're looking at it going, well, if I can keep a bigger piece of the pie. And the cool thing is now we've done enough of these deals where we can say, hey, this is what this shakes out to. This is how quickly these people are recouping the nominal costs that we might have gone in on some of these lighter deals, and they're making a lot more money. It's like, it's working. And now, if anything, now we're kind of having to go and sort of make a case for like, hey, maybe we want to do a bigger investment. Now we're ready for it. And they're kind of going, but these deals are really lucrative. Let's just keep it this way. So it's just a really interesting spectrum, and it depends on what people want and what they're hoping to get out of it.
How do you approach A&R? Are you out there scouting for talent, or are a lot of folks kind of approaching you with deals, and who are you looking for?
There's nothing specific. Bucky is our label manager, and he took that role on, I think it's 2 years ago. He really sort of grabbed the reins on that and started to broaden the tastes of the label, and brought on some really cool hip hop stuff, some alternative stuff that was sort of outside of my lane anyways. And initially a lot of the A&R is just word of mouth. It was, who do we know? Who are our pals? And who are our pals' pals? And there's definitely, that can come off as a bit nepotistic, but it's also really organic, and it kind of represents this community of people that we're surrounded by, where we were just able to be like, hey, these are the amazing people in our backyard that could use a little bit of help. Let's work with them. And I would say the most meaningful stuff tends to be word of mouth, where we hear about somebody from one of our artists who goes, oh, this person's amazing, you should really check them out. Or somebody will come to us and say, hey, I'm friends with Field Guide, and he really loved working with you on this release. Check this out. And we go, what? We love that. Let's chat. There's a small amount that is like totally unsolicited, get submissions through our website or DMs or wherever, and we listen to everything. We have a system for going through everything, and that definitely has led to some totally unsolicited connections where like, this is amazing, cool, let's do something. But I would say for the most part, it is just kind of based on the community. And then as we grow, we've been doing a lot more travel and business development stuff. So people are going out all over the place. We sent somebody out to Future Echoes earlier this year in Sweden, and Stu was out at the Great Escape, Focus Wales, March, doing a lot more of that kind of thing where we're out on the ground trying to see what's really exciting and stuff that moves us. But at the end of the day, what we're looking for is excellence. We want to work with people who are excellent. They're excellent at their craft. They are inspiring us and lighting us up, and we feel like we want to champion what they're doing, and that they're great people too. No bullies, no jerks. We want to work with good people who share our values and our work ethos and who make awesome music.
So then, I mean, you've described, I know that you guys work with pan-genre folks that transcend genre, that work in all sorts of different types of music, but seeing as we are a folk podcast, it's in the name. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about how you approach the release of albums that kind of fall within that genre, and some of the marketing and opportunities that you see available to artists working in folk.
Interestingly, I think the sort of the core of what we do on the label applies to most genres and doesn't differ that much. Like, again, sort of starting with what are an artist or a group's objectives, and how can we help develop the narrative and the story behind the record? And then how do we communicate that to literally everyone we can think of? There are some, very specific sort of targets that happen when you're in various genres. Satellite radio is a really important one for us, trying to get our artists onto the North Americana channel. It's a great spot for some of the folk people that we work with. That's kind of very specific to that niche or that genre. But broadly, it's really about developing those stories and trying to create this sort of cohesive campaign that feels like we're bringing people into the story of this album and this group and inviting them in to engage and be a part of it. And we support that with a lot of different digital marketing stuff. So it's like, creating content. With folk, you'd be maybe a little less inclined to do traditional music videos, and you'd be more leaning towards live performance stuff that sort of showcases what a band does on a stage, because so much of what we do as folk artists happens live. So you capitalize on that. The Fretless are a great example of that. Like, the live performance videos are kind of core to what they do. So figuring out how to put that front and center, and then doing what we can sort of behind the scenes from a digital marketing perspective to try and build fan bases and audiences for people. And that gets sort of into the netherworld of like marketing mumbo jumbo, but we're basically going out there just trying to build online fans, because that's such a big part of sort of growing an audience and bringing ears to the project, is getting people to buy in on what you're doing on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, following you on Spotify, wherever they listen on DSPs. And we found that we can draw a line between the amount of money that we spend on advertising and the amount of fans that we bring in. New fans find it on streaming services, and it sort of helps bolster all that activity. And ideally, at the end of the campaign, you can look at all that stuff and go, here, we've made this sort of marked improvement. You've got more people listening. You've got more fans engaging, more people to tell your story to. Also, celebrating these wonderful records. Of the last Fretless record we did, Open House, was this really cool collaborative thing where they were doing covers of all these tunes with these guest artists. So that was this really wonderful opportunity to bring in all these other artists to the story. So that was a big part of that campaign, was connecting with these artists and helping them telegraph what was going on with the band. And that wound up getting a Juno nomination in 2022, 23. So that was a great success for us, and a bit of a feather in our cap.
Then, like, I find that, as an independent label, the majority of labels that I think that are signing folk artists in general, fall in the independent label stream. But we are seeing, particularly in folk, that there are less labels out there that are, just in general, I think actually, a ton of the labels got recently bought up and sold and bought up and sold again, and which like certainly happened with like Borealis and True North and Stony Plain. And I see that there's like kind of like space for people to start labels, possibly, if they're interested in it. And if folks are interested in entering into that, I know that you approached it coming as an artist. If folks are interested in entering into the label space and starting their own label, do you have some advice for them of how to get into it?
Yeah, sure. I would say there's sort of like, there's the mechanics of running a record label, which is, I would consider like understanding and managing your metadata, the supply chain stuff. How do you get that music and that metadata to the DSPs, either through a distributor, through another label, near a sub-label, through like a Merlin style thing? Like there's all these different ways of doing that. TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid, whatever. They're all mechanisms to deliver the masters to the DSP. So that's an important part of it. Then along with that is like the accounting and statement part of it, because if you're a record label, you got to pay your artists. How do you do that? How do you get the deals together? Where do you get a record label contract from? All of those kind of like practical, mechanical considerations of how to run a record label. Where does the money come from? How does the funding work? Et cetera, et cetera. Like that's important to get done well and to be accurate with, because you're dealing with people's money, people's records, et cetera. But I think the actual work that will make you a good or effective record label is that other stuff, which is like the championing of great music and artists and releases. It's building networks of people that you can go to when it's time to tell them about these really amazing artists and their songs and their tours and their careers. It's about creating relationships with all the various funders, people across Canada that can help you get the job done and help underwrite some of the tremendous costs of marketing and producing and releasing records and that kind of thing. And then that kind of comes down to like the heart that you have in it. And it's really hard to fake that. So it's a little different than artist management. Artist management is like the most extreme version of that, because you take one artist and you're literally like a bull. You're just running through brick wall after brick wall, standing in front of moving train, taking bullets. And you're just like so selfless and determined and singularly focused. A record label, you kind of spread that out. But it's similarly like you kind of want to be prepared to have that kind of heart where you're going to stand there with somebody's art, which is, one of the most important things in their lives, and you have to stand up there and really, really give a shit about telling that story, telling it well, and trying to help. And that's not for the faint of heart, but if that appeals to you, then I think there's room. It's never been easier to be a record label. The work is harder, but it's never been more accessible. There's never been more tools, more software. That software has never been cheaper than now. So I think the barriers to entry are lowering, even though maybe the space is crowded and there's so much happening, but you could dive in if you're a glutton for punishment and willing to put in some late nights.
Well, then on the flip side, actually, I'm not going to go full flip side, half flip side for artists that are going to, DIY it, which many folks do. How can you be the best record label for yourself?
I would have said at one point that any of the jobs that we do at a record label, you could do for yourself. And I think increasingly that I don't know that that's true. So I think sort of accepting that the limitations of doing it on your own is important, because otherwise you'll always feel like you are failing or falling behind or not doing enough. And that can be really defeating. I think it's about picking the things that you feel like you can reasonably and realistically achieve, and then chasing those and trying to do a really good job of those things. So you kind of got to prioritize and everybody's different. Everybody's appetite for self-marketing and administration and organization is different. Some people have a lot of room for that. Some people, it's like, I don't want to do any of that. I can hardly bring myself to flip open a spreadsheet. It just makes me want to puke. There's like such a spectrum of artists who are willing to do that kind of work, leaning into what you're good at. But I would say, understanding the story of your album, like it's really hard to roll out the idea of like artist releases record. It doesn't stand out. And I mean, there are always exceptions to the rule. And there are albums that are so singularly perfect and beautiful and brilliant that they just break all convention and the cream rises. But I think even then there's always an element of kismet that you can't necessarily count on. So, every artist is going to believe that their work is the best that they have done, and that's important. But figuring out how to communicate that story, what makes it unique and beautiful and important? What are you trying to say? What's really at the heart of it? And everybody has such a unique voice, and everybody has important things that they want to say, and figuring out how to frame that so that people understand it and get it and can be brought into the process of what you're doing. And I think it's also a challenge to artists to like really focus on the meaningfulness of their work. Like at the end of the day, you're done, you finished a record and you're struggling to find meaning with it. It's going to be really hard to get other people to get it too. Then taking that and then just figuring out like, how can you tell that story? Who are the people around you that can help you tell that story? Do you have friends that are publicists? Do you have friends that are in the music business? Do you have organized friends around you who might want to help? All of the greatest music industry people I know were dragged into it somehow. Very few of them came into it being like, I'm going to be a great record executive someday. They were just like people who love shows, who just started promoting shows or started volunteering at the West End. And like, that's the path in, and you're near it. So finding those passionate people around you, asking for help, doing the best you can to sort of be organized about it all and not burn yourself out, pace yourself too.
Do you think that there's a particular role that you would suggest people hire out? I mean, you mentioned that there's like, you said that it's never been easier in terms of like the technology that's available. So that's even in itself is a leg up because we have services to collect royalties and distribute them. We have services to digitally distribute music. And, there are a lot of amazing tools for folks who are DIYing it to actually release their music. Yeah. Do you think that there's like a particular service that's really clutch that people can look to hire out, especially to tell that story when it comes to marketing?
Oh, yeah, good point. I think maybe like getting very specific, like there are people who really, really understand digital advertising in the social media space. Like if that's a part of your strategy, like you just mentioned digital marketing
Mhm.
specifically, but like if you're an artist who's thinking, I want to reach more people on social media, I want to build my audience, and you, like all of us, are hearing the abysmally low engagement numbers that come from organic posts on social media, how hard it is to reach, if you have 10,000 followers on Instagram, how unlikely it is that you're going to reach more than 10% of them with a post, for example. If you're an artist in that platform, you're going to feel that, you're going to know what I'm talking about. So, we talk about how, you got to pay to play. If you want to reach them all, then you got to pony up and pay the meta gods for access to your fans, which sucks, but hey, it is just is what it is. So if you're thinking about doing that with advertising money, which is definitely one route to do that, there are people out there who are really good at spending that money and know how to build fan bases and create marketing funnels that help you find and refine who your people are on social media. And then those ad dollars are going to be way more efficient. And they typically operate on a sliding scale. They're either, for us as a label, it's a retainer, but often it's a percentage of ad sales. So you can go to these people and, run smaller campaigns that aren't going to be wildly costly, but they're going to be way more effective. So like if you pay 10 or 15% of your ad budget to have somebody run it for you, they're going to be way more effective. Don't think of that as this really prohibitive cost. You're going to get way more than 10 or 15% in terms of effectiveness. So that's maybe one place that just about anybody can bring somebody on.
And then for folks that are thinking of signing to a label, do you have like tips for artists in terms of what to look out for, how to protect themselves, and what to be looking for in signing a label deal? Or how to pick who you want to work with, really?
I think so much of it is going to be word of mouth. Talk to your friends who are on these labels, get references, find out what people's experiences are. Now that can change wildly from artist to artist, but it will help give you an understanding of the culture of the company that you're thinking about working with, and that matters. There's a fantastic amount of turnover in these kind of roles, especially in bigger companies. So keeping that in mind too, like I've watched that happen so many times. Stacy, whatever, from whatever giant label comes in and totally enamors some artist, and they just, I love this person. They get me, they get my music. This is going to be amazing. They sign the deal. The day after the deal signed, oh, I'm sorry, Stacy doesn't work for so and so anymore. That happens a lot. So as much as you're looking for somebody who's going to be a serious champion for what you do, you also need to be open to the fact that the culture of the company is important, because that person may not be there. If you sign to a 2-album deal, if you have an option on your record deal, you could be working with these people for the next 4 or 5 years, regardless of who that person is. So getting a feel for what is the culture of the company? Does it align with how you want to be represented? Are you after money, or are you after something else? Is it, because sometimes that is the cold hard factor. Like, I blew my life savings on this record, I need a huge advance, otherwise I am bankrupt and out of the music business. Well, that's a different story than I have scrimped and saved and I'm not loaded, but I have enough to sort of squeeze by, and I could maybe put more into a marketing budget than into an upfront advance. Is the record label taking your rights in perpetuity? Are you assigning the rights to them permanently, or are you licensing them? And a license is a term that has an end date, and at that end date, the rights revert to you. And that's something to consider. Forever is a very long time. It also, for those of us that have kids and families, like if something happens to me, those records, and I mean, they're not worth much for me, but maybe for some artist that's listening to this, one day your stuff's going to be worth a fortune, and you don't get that back. Your family doesn't get that back. So licensing is definitely, to me, is a much more viable alternative than giving away your rights. I don't see why somebody would do that in the modern world, unless you just need the money so badly, and then that's fine too. But retain your rights wherever you can. Make sure they revert to you at some point. I mean, and then the terms of the deal, the splits, the specific splits, how you're getting paid. There's a million different types of record deals out there. There's profit shares, there's royalty deals, and they vary so wildly. The way you recoup costs, what costs you recoup, how you get paid, what you get paid on. Like I said, are the neighboring rights a part of your deal? Probably. For the most part, they aren't. Is that something you want to fight for? Like, I would ask anybody who's listening to this, like, if your peers are being played on satellite radio and you think your music stands a reasonable shot of being on either The Verge or Sirius XM or Indigiverse or any of these channels, if your friends are on there, your peers are on there, you think your music can fit on there, you really want to retain the ability to participate in the master side of those neighboring rights, because it can be wildly lucrative. And I think I might catch hell from our label peers, but I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to think about. Get a lawyer, better than no lawyer, to look over a deal, because it could have, really long-reaching implications for you.
And then I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about either an artist that you've recently signed that you're excited about, or if there's a release that's coming up on Birthday Cake that you are particularly interested in sharing.
There's actually so much exciting stuff happening over on the record label side of going back over the last couple of months and then looking into the future. We put out a record by a band called Dweller, which is a bit of a super group. It's Dylan McDonald from Field Guide, Chris Ulrich, who's another one of our label and publishing artists, Georgia Harmer, and Julian Syhogios. Sure, I'm saying that last name wrong, but he's a monster drummer out of Toronto, and it's the four of them, and it's so badass. That came out late last year, December, and that's been phenomenal. There's an artist called Night Shifts, which is Andrew Oliver from a band called Wild River. He's got an EP out. It's just called Night Shifts. It's fantastic. 5 songs. It's brilliant. We really love that. We put out the new Field Guide record in May, Rootin' For You, which is probably my favorite one yet. We've worked the last, all but the very first EP, and it's been just tremendous watching him grow. He's taking over in pretty serious ways, touring his tail off this year in North America, and is making a real big splash, and that's been so fun to be a part of that. Also phenomenal. Nerve has been brilliant. Madeline's phenomenal. This record is a gut punch. It's so beautiful, and we're so excited to be working with her. We've got the Fretless stuff coming out. Their new record, Glasswing, is stunning, and just another brilliant thing in there. And Madeline guests on a bunch of the tracks too, so that's cool. Signed a new band out of Manitoba called Slow Spirit that I utterly adore. Eric Roberts, Natalie Bourne record that they did with Matt Foster and Liam Duncan of Boy Golden fame. They got a record called That's the Gods Talking, and that comes out July 26th. And that record is so good. I don't know, like a folkier Radiohead. They're so good. Consummate musicians, freakishly good writers. So fucking awesome. Jeanette King is another artist that we're releasing right away. She's an R&B artist, is based in Montreal, and she's brilliant too. So many cool things coming out on the label, either just recently or about to. And then some of our sort of cornerstone artists that are off campaign right now, but obviously my band, The Bros, we're working on a new record, and Begonia is also working towards a new record sometime soon. So That's really exciting. Lots of fun stuff.
Well, that's a huge amount of stuff, Dave. That's really, really exciting. I'm so excited for you and the label, and for all the just truly fantastic artists that get to work with you folks. We've mentioned you work with a ton of incredible folk artists. I mean, is genre anything? Is it meaningless? Is it meaningful? Who knows? But when we talk about folk, we try to define it as broadly as possible. As an organization, we're an arts service organization. We, are trying to serve a diverse group of folks that have a grounding connection, we'll say, in the music that they make. When you think of folk, what are you thinking of? And is genre important to you as a label? Is that kind of definition important to you as a label? Are you trying to define things more or define things less?
That's such a good question. And I think it's, a very nuanced thing to think about. I would say, like, you'll hear this a lot. A lot of labels want to say, hey, we don't do genre. And I think people are quick to, and there's some that obviously do. We are a black metal label. We are a classical label. But it matters to us in so much as I think genre can be proxy for community. And I definitely discovered that with my own band. When we sort of came onto the scene, we didn't know what to call ourselves. And a lot of bands don't. And increasingly, I think a lot of bands sort of fall between the cracks. And you don't know we all come from such diverse musical backgrounds. And the moment you have more than one person in a room, now you're absorbing all of their influences and backgrounds. So you can kind of come with a strange potpourri. And I remember resisting it early. Like, don't put me in a box, man. I don't want to have to define myself. But so later on in our career, we sort of fell under this umbrella of Americana stuff which is, folk adjacent is sort of broadly in the roots world. And when that happened, what we found is that we immediately sort of landed in a world with people that musically really resonated with what we were doing. And those people became friends, and they became collaborators, and they became co-conspirators, and they became people we wanted to tour with, and talking about friends getting that sort of grassroots information on who's doing good business, what the great labels are. These are the people we turn to. So that does matter to us, because a lot of those things inform the way we connect people to build a campaign. What artists we're going to work with and target, and is there support opportunities, or should we put somebody on a tour that could also use it? Like these are all things that will fall under the category of a certain genre, because this music will complement other people playing music like it. But ultimately what we're talking about is community, and who are your people, who's your network, who are the supports, who are the people you trust and can chat with. So it's like, as much as we're not going out being like, we only sign these types of bands, or we don't want to work with these types of bands. Once we find something that's excellent and somebody on the team is ready to champion it and scream from the mountaintops about this band that they love, then we do want to investigate sort of where you lie and who your musical community is, and who we can draw from and lean on and build on, or even just like, here are these other folks who've had these great successes. Let's talk about what they did to get there. Where did they play? What festivals are they doing? What live sessions are they doing? Where are they playing on the radio? That is all stuff that's informed, or that we can sort of tie loosely under this umbrella of genre, and that gives us a bit of a playbook to follow. So,
and you got to know which satellite radio station is going to play, to pitch to, and yeah.
If you take one thing away from this conversation, disproportionately chatting about Sirius XM. Yeah. But pay attention, folks. It matters.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been an absolute treat, and I hope we get a chance to chat again very soon.
We certainly will. Thank you for the wonderful conversation and the thoughtful questions. It's been a blast.
That's all for this episode, friends. The ReFolKus podcast is brought to you by Folk Music Ontario. Find out more by heading to folkmusicontario.org/ReFolKus. That's ReFolKus. The podcast is produced by Kayla Nizon and Rosalind Dennett, and mixed by Jordan Moore at the Pod Cabin. The opening theme is by King Cardiac, and the artwork is by Jamie Karn. Please give us a download, a like, subscribe, rate, and review to let us know you're listening. Until next time, keep playing that folky music.